right, it's about that time we'll get going. We do have some new technology here to help the folks online. So can you folks online hear us okay? Yes, perfect. Good to know. Hopefully the quality of the sound will be a little bit better. We do have a lapel pin, so hopefully that will improve things moving forward. But it is my distinct pleasure to welcome to the Center for Learning and Instructional Excellence, Dr. Devin Bean. Dr. Bean is a clinical professor in the Department of Physical Therapy and Athletic Training at ISU, where he has been teaching since August of 2024. He is a licensed practicing physical therapist and a board certified pediatric clinical specialist. Dr. Bean is an American Physical Therapy Association credentialed clinical instructor and brings several years of teaching and clinical education experience into the classroom. His teaching reflects intentional effort to use modern instructional strategies and technology to better engage today's learners and support meaningful participation in clinical reasoning. Today's seminar, Click Post Participate, highlights his use of Padlet to facilitate meaningful student participation in the classroom. So I will turn things over to Devin. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here and to have this opportunity. All right. I was introduced to Padlet in 2024, right after starting while attending a conference for new physical therapy pediatric educators. And we used the platform, and I thought, maybe I can use this to facilitate discussions in my classrooms. So I'm hoping today, rather than being super prescriptive, I'm hoping that I can provide some ideas that people can build off of and maybe introduce you to some tools that can be useful in your own classrooms. I'm discovering some new ways to use these technologies myself, so hopefully we all have a good time today. My purpose is to give you an introduction to Padlet and how it can be used to promote more active learning. So I want to reinforce the importance of active learning in the classroom. Then I'll introduce Padlet as a discussion tool. That's how I've primarily used it. And then we'll highlight together some practical strategies about how it can be integrated into courses. Throughout this presentation, you will have opportunities to participate on Padlet. So if you have a smartphone, then I would recommend that you have that available. There will be a QR code for you to scan, and I'd love for you to participate. This will give you some interactions with Padlet on the side of a student, but also from the perspective of a teacher. So that's the objectives. How it will run, we'll take about 15 minutes to review the importance of active learning. Then I'll overview some basics of how to use Padlet. And we'll wrap up by brainstorming together how we could use Padlet to address two fairly common classroom scenarios, and I'll answer any questions at the end. So starting with active learning. I like to ask myself the questions like, what is something, what isn't something? So what is active learning? It is having students engage, discuss, practice, investigate, and create. Really, it boils down to giving students an opportunity to find and discover answers on their own. It's much less prescriptive than maybe a traditional format, which is what we think of as like a traditional lecture. So even with note-taking, lecture is considered a passive form of learning. And a lot of times in hybrid formats, maybe we have to have students watch a recorded video. That again becomes a passive form of learning. And this comes to the idea of we're telling students information and we want them to tell it back to us. Sometimes we use the term regurgitation to describe this. So there are differences in the benefits of active and passive learning on student outcomes. But before I get into that, I want to hear what you think. Why is active learning important? Consider how it's benefited you or your students. So get your smartphones on your screens and scan the QR code. This will take you to Padlet, a Padlet I designed specific for this discussion. You'll be prompted to share your name. You could sign up if you want at this point, or you can simply proceed as a guest and try and answer the question in under 1 minute. I'm going to pull up the Padlet while everyone is answering. All right, I can see some people are responding. I'll give you a little bit of time to write your answers. And we don't need a very long answer. We can just, get something quick. Great. Excellent. All right. So we've got a couple of people answering here. More responses might come in. Looks like we've got people saying that active learning can facilitate mindful engagement. It improves learning by making it stick and applying information. It enhances understanding of concepts. It can help students be more likely to retain what they learn, promotes deep learning, creates a deeper connection to the content as well as maintaining engagement. I think these are all great benefits of using active learning. So let me highlight a couple of things I was able to pull from the research here. I'm going to share my screen and I go back to the previous screen, back to the PowerPoint here. All right. Give me just a moment to come back. I felt the best way to represent the benefits was in a word cloud. When I consulted a lot of the research, there were a couple of theme words that came up. Number one was engagement, and that was a theme that you identified as well. Engagement is something that is really facilitated through more active learning. Also, another theme was connection. Connection with other students, connection with the content, as you pointed out in your Padlet comments, but also connection between the instructor and the students. Other key important benefits of active learning: course success. Students are less likely to drop courses and less likely to fail courses if there's an active learning component included in the course design. They have increased insight, they're more willing to give and receive feedback, and they're more motivated. So these are just a few of the themes that I was able to pull from the research on the importance of active learning. So I want to hear a little bit, how do you use it right now? Padlet isn't the only way. How are you using active learning currently? If you didn't keep up Padlet, you can scan the QR code again, but tell me what you think. In another minute or so, how are you engaging your students? How are you actively helping them to actively learn? So I'll look for your answers here in the second column. We've got a couple of responses coming in. All right. I'm sure there's some more responses coming in. I want to make some comments, and I have a couple of questions. Because we're in a mixed medium format, if I'm identifying your name or your pseudonym, please feel free to unmute your microphone and provide a little insight. You don't have to turn your camera on if you're not comfortable with that, but I'd love to hear a little bit more. So we've got someone saying I see polling in a couple of places. I see case studies, group activities, think, pair, share. I've seen a couple of times. Cahoots. That looks like it's kind of a, in that polling realm, think, pair, share. So I want to come here for I want to ask Bold Spider. You had two posts here. Whoever's Bold Spider, can you describe what those group activities are? I have a concept of what think, pair, share is, but can you tell me more? What kinds of group activities are you using to facilitate that active learning in your classroom? That's okay.
The group activities, I've done some different things like listening teams, like if you have a lecture and you have one group that's summarizes the content briefly, another group that writes up a couple of questions that they have about the content, a group that talks about how to apply the information, and you have different groups and they report back after the lecture. So that's something I have done. Sometimes I run out of time because I end up talking too much, but I really like the idea of doing active learning, but it's easy to do the lectures.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And I love the description of your group activities, having different groups do different things with material. One group providing a summary, one group providing a list of questions they might have about the content further, and having another group describe an application. I think that's a fabulous active learning activity. Thanks for sharing that. So I want to highlight, and we'll talk about this in the application of Padlet. This was a fabulous example. So thank you, Spencer, who's using Bold Spider as our pseudonym, for taking the time to share. Because while you provided a great answer on the Padlet, by following up just a little bit, we were all able to get a little bit more insight. And so think about this. We're going to come back to this experience as we continue to kind of explore this world of this, I'll call it like a quasi-computer mediated discussion that we're having. Because I think sometimes when we just talk or when we just have students contribute electronically, we can miss things. But when we're able to combine both of the mediums, sometimes we can appeal to students in with different comfort levels. So I really appreciate this experience. Let me come back to the PowerPoint here. Give me just a moment. All right. So thank you all for your responses. So common ways that active learning are applied are a lot of the things that you said. Think, pair, share came up several times in Padlet. Mind mapping, or word clouds, Case studies I saw several times. Polling, in-person writing prompts, maybe a jigsaw, which is, I would say, somewhat similar to what Spencer described also. And also discussion. Discussions can be a way to facilitate active learning. And this is one of my favorite ways to actively learn. It's probably because I consider myself a chatterbox. If I ever got a comment the entire time I was in school was, "Nice kid, talks a lot." And so being able to have the discussion, I feel like allows me in real time to ask my questions, connect concepts. And I think it can have that same benefit for a lot of students. But sometimes our students won't participate. I don't know if any of you have had that experience, but it happens a lot. Even with graduate level physical therapy students, they just don't want to participate. Seeing some things in the chat here. I don't want to miss any questions or comments here. Oh, okay, thanks, Mike. So how can we facilitate this participation when students are reluctant? And they could be reluctant for a multitude of reasons. I think students nowadays are more anxious. They're really concerned about not being right. I just came from a lab where we were challenging student expectations, and it was amazing to see how much they would defend what they did, even if it wasn't effective, because they're so concerned about being wrong. Maybe they're just not prepared, or maybe the context is challenging. Think about today. We've got 3 people in one classroom and about 6 people on Zoom. That can be a challenging medium to facilitate a discussion in, because people may comment on the chat. People may want to say things in real time. How do we manage this multimedia teaching mode? And that's where I found Padlet can help me leverage, because it allows me to control the situation just a little bit more. Another thing to note is if we don't facilitate that participation, we're going to lose the benefits of active learning. So it's really important for us to try and maximize the participation no matter what challenges that we're facing. So let's talk a little bit more about how Padlet can help us overcome some of these barriers. I want to start by describing what it is and how you can use it, and then we'll really get into this as we brainstorm together. So Padlet is primarily an online forum. It's like a real-time discussion board, as you've seen with your participations. I really like Padlet because it has a lot of customizability. I can change the way it looks, I can change its application, and it has a couple of built-in AI tools that can make it convenient. It also has capacity to do things like polling. In the physical therapy program, we have access to something called point solutions, which is great, but we're paying for it. If we don't have funds for something like that, who knows what's going to happen with the current state of affairs. Padlet could offer a free alternative to providing polling. And there's always, places like Kahoot, but again, it's just another resource that's a potential. What I do like about Padlet is that the information that is created by me, but also contributed by students or other people who are interacting with it, can be captured. It can be turned into a slideshow. It can be turned into a PDF handout. So if you're getting lots of good input and you can allow comments, then you can capture that and give it to the students as a recap of, this is what we talked about today. This was the insights that you and your peers had, so that they can have at least a resource to review. The nicest thing about Padlet is it's free, because we all need things that are free. There are different levels. I have survived completely by using the free version, which gives me 3 Padlet boards. So when I'm done with something, I have to download that content and delete it. And it limits the size of my uploads. I usually don't upload anything more than some words. So I've never exceeded that. There are different paid plans if you're interested, but I'm not trying to sell a product. I'm trying to give you a free resource here. Something else that I came across while I was preparing for this opportunity was Padlet TA. And I'll show you where that link is when we look at the website together. It has AI-powered tools that allow you to create resources. Some of these resources are geared maybe towards undergraduates or even high school and elementary age students, but I found a few of them that applied even to my graduate students. You can work on lesson plans, worksheets, interactive games. I'm not here to talk about Padlet TA. I'm talking about Padlet proper, but I want to introduce that there are additional resources through this free website that you can explore that could give you extra leverage and extra activities that you could apply with your students. So I want to describe how I personally use Padlet. My number one use is as a real-time discussion board. Now, I use this as an ungraded activity primarily, and it's because my students are shy. We have a split cohort model. So half of my students are in Pocatello with me, and half of them are Zooming in a classroom in Meridian. And almost without fail, the students on the other side of what feels like the world sometimes are more hesitant to participate. But they're very willing to type no matter where they are. And maybe it's because these students have been raised in a digital age. They're used to texting and posting and Instagramming, and I don't even know what the latest social media platforms are. But they're so used to contributing electronically, it seems to be a little bit more natural for many of them. And they also love to work in groups, which I think is a pretty key feature of current students, is they love to work in groups. They might hate group work, but they love to collaborate. And so Padlet allows me to leverage some of their preferences because I can let them type, I can let them discuss in groups and contribute a collective idea. And then we can describe that a little bit more, like what happened with Spencer. So what I do is I'll propose a topic or a question very similar to what happened here today. I'll have that on the board, I'll have my QR code present, and I'll let the students then type their responses. I find it's helpful if I give them a time limit. If I say, oh, write your response, they may take a while to get there. But if I say, write your response in 1 or 2 minutes, they usually cut to the chase a little bit faster. So I'll give them a time limit. I let them provide their responses. And then as they're coming up, I will read the responses, making some personal notes in my mind or perhaps on a sticky note of, this is really good. I need to follow up on this. If I wanted to turn this into a graded activity, then what I usually do is have them write a reflection on the topic of the discussion or something that a peer shared that they found to be meaningful. And I can add a graded component after the fact. And I have found that that tends to be very successful. So let's take, before I get to the tour of Padlet, I just want to offer some thoughts. I have found that my students have become very used to this as we've done it more. And now they'll ask me, oh, are we doing a Padlet today, Dr. Bean? And that's fine because I can usually get more out of them when we do. It's a way for them to contribute. Sometimes I request that they type their names, and sometimes I let them use the pseudonym. If you don't put your name in, it'll assign you. They're usually really fun animal names. And I let them work under the pseudonym, but I haven't yet had an experience where someone didn't own up to the pseudonym, especially when I'm highlighting the comment as something that was neat and I want to follow up on. Usually that empowers them or emboldens them to want to, they felt validated and they want to comment and maybe get a little bit more of praise from me. But it facilitates that participation. So I want to show you how to set something like this up. You saw what I set up, but let's talk about how I got there, because there are some mechanics. I think the best way to do this is to build a Padlet together. I will say, if you have questions about this process or would like to review, there is, if you type Padlet 101 into a search browser, then it would take you to Padlet's learning page, and they have a very concise series that teaches you how to use the features of Padlet. I think it's very well done and very fast to watch. So, and the link is included here. So when you get to Padlet, this is, if you type in padlet.com, this is what you will see. You're going to look up at the login or sign in tab. Now you have used Padlet as a student form or the QR code right now. So that may, if you're trying to do this in real time, you may have to clear your cache or close the browser completely. If you haven't ever signed up, I'd recommend you just do that. It's free. It'll prompt you with an email address. You create a password. It's very simple. Once you've gotten through that step, it will take you to the home page, which is pretty blank. And this is where I'm going to click on, personally, the Make a Padlet button. Because I usually go to Padlet to make one. So I'll click on this button right here, and it takes me to the creation page. My preferred tab, and maybe I'm more of a control freak than I'm willing to admit, is the blank board. I like to build my Padlets from the ground up because I like to know exactly where things are. But there are several additional tools that you can use that have AI built into them that can help you create a board. And I do have another example of an AI generated board I'll show you as well. So you can have it help you create a discussion board or some other kind of class activity, a lesson plan. If you are doing things that involve like a geographic component, you could do a map. It has map-based features, and it'll help you set that up. It also will help you set up something like an assessment poll. When you click on those AI tools, it guides you through the prompt. So it'll tell you what it wants in different areas so it can create a more customized Padlet for you. And you can refine it once it's been generated. But assuming we've gone to the blank board, it's going to auto-generate something like this. So this is literally, when I click blank board, this is what pulled up for me. I was just taking screenshots for this. It likes to give you, I don't know, some sort of an affirming name. So usually it's my dazzling Padlet or my stunning Padlet, my marvelous Padlet. I always change that because it feels a little tacky. So you'll want to adjust the title of what you want, and then you need to choose your format. My personal favorite for discussions is columns. And that's the format that we've interacted with so far in this presentation, is columns, because I can have sections with headings and then I can have all the discussion on that topic within the column. I'm going to leave it up to you to explore some of the other formats. Wall is very, it says it's brick-like. I find it to be a little bit messy. Freeform is anywhere. I think it's incredibly difficult to manage if you're trying to do things real time. Grid is similar to columns, but more in a horizontal format. Rows is similar. I find columns to be the most efficient, but again, you could explore something that works best for you. Timeline is great if you're trying to identify things chronologically. And same with map. If you have a geographic component, maybe you would choose a geographic Padlet. Those are things that don't apply as much in physical therapy, so I don't use those. But again, you can explore. And if you try an AI tool, it may help you generate something like that. So once you've chosen your title and your format, then you'll have your base Padlet. Once I'm here, I like to determine what my I would go to my settings tab. I'm actually going to go to the website and show you what those settings are in real time. Other areas, though, that I would refine would be the section header. So I can either come and just type in what I want, and if I have more than one, I'll click on Add Section. And then when it's all done, I can click on the share arrow, and that gives me some different opportunities to share it as a slideshow. It also gives me my QR code that I can copy and paste. And I'll show you those features when we get to the website. So I'm going to pull that up right now. Give me just a moment. In our classrooms, I'm able to switch screens instantly. So it's a little bit quicker than what I have to do with sharing my screen in Zoom. So sorry about that. All right, I'm going to switch to the current screen. Hopefully you can see when it pulls up here. All right, so this is the Padlet that we were looking at on the slideshow. Trying to adjust my window here because Zoom is blocking my view. Okay. So when I click on the settings tab of Padlet, I get the settings bar. It allows me, if I didn't catch naming my Padlet, I can change my title in the heading. I can also add a secondary description or an icon. There's an example of that in the Padlet we used for your responses. I can also click on the Appearance tab, which allows me to choose the wallpaper. I can upload a photo if I wish. I can choose a color scheme, things like that. Layout, I also can change the layout if I missed and I thought, ooh, I did columns, but I want to try something out that's different. I can click on Layout and it will allow me to do that. I want to highlight Posts because I can customize what shows up in the posting fields if I click on this arrow. I don't want to give you whiplash, so I won't click through it, but this is where you can start to customize the posting field. I can also turn on or off the author name. So if I want this to be truly anonymous, I could click off that. And then it's completely anonymous responses. If that's an issue with my students, I can make it completely anonymous, and we could do this 100% digital. Not my preferred method because I like to identify the group and follow up, but it's something you could do. If I click on engagement, I can allow or disallow comments on individual posts. This may or may not work for your situation. I can change the reactions to hearts or upvotes or downvotes. And I can also make comments anonymous or not. And the comment anonymity and the post anonymity are separate. So you can make it as anonymous or as engaged as you want. For content, this is where I can monitor every post that comes in. I allow for the AI, I have it on auto, so AI will do a base screen for offensive content. If I find something made it through that is inappropriate, I can delete the post in real time as well. And I can also make this board copyable or not. If I want to customize the URL, I can do that. I've never done that. So that's how I can set up the Padlet the way that I want. When it's where I want and when students have contributed, I come to the Share button. This is where I can get my QR code. And so I will download this image, include it on my PowerPoint, and allow my students to access it easily. They tend to have the easiest time if I do a QR code. But I can also just copy the link and post the link on my PowerPoint. You can add breakout rooms and all kinds of things. I find that I get lost in the weeds if I do that. What I also want to highlight in the Share tab is export. Because when I'm done with these, I like to export my Padlets as a PDF. And it turns all of the posts, it makes them individual tiles or individual segments of a PDF document. And so I have a summary of what we discussed. And I find it's a great way for me to also review, okay, the students all commented on this and no one commented on this other idea. I need to emphasize that more. And it allows me to follow up, but it also gives them the resources to reflect on how they were engaged in class. So I want to show you an example of what an AI-generated Padlet can look like. I don't normally do this, but I teach pediatrics. And so I used Padlet to help me auto-generate an adaptive play activity for children with cerebral palsy. So I typed in my prompts to AI and it spit this out. It was about 1 minute of it thinking and it gave this to me. So it gives them their instructions. This is technically using what's called the scroll format. I could change this if I wanted. And so then I practiced as a student, what would my post look like? If you don't do columns, the post button is down here. It's a little plus button. And if I click on that, you can see here, this is an example of a customized post. This looks a little bit different than what you saw on the Click Post Participate Padlet, because this has, the fields have been specifically designated. The AI differentiated that. I can do that on my own, but it sure saved me a lot of time to have that auto-generated. So then the students can provide the information that I want in my instructions here in their post directly. So I did that and made my own post. What I also did is there are image generating tools. So one of the instructions in this simulated activity was to do an AI generated image of our intervention. And I thought that was a pretty cute picture. So I describe what it is I want. It has the headings, and then we could talk about this. If students posted this and they gave me their intervention format, I could say, hey, I really like the way this looks. Can you show me in real time? And I can follow up on that discussion. And it was almost no effort for me to create this. If when we were done, I wanted to share this, I can come to export. And if I export it as a PDF, I always like handout. I'll hit something like generate. It takes about 30 seconds to get that format, and I'll show you what that looks like when it's created. So this is what a Padlet export handout looks like. It has the title, it has the instructions or the initial instruction post here, and then it shows, you can see it clearly differentiates between the instructions and the post I made. I find when a picture is added, it makes it even easier to look at for students. So if you are planning on using the handouts as a significant part of your format, I would encourage you to have students include upload or have AI generate images for them. And that AI image generation does not have a limit. It's not the best. It might not be as good as like a Chat GPT, but it's pretty good and there's no limit. So if they don't like the picture, they can scrap it and have it generate another one. So I find that that's really helpful.
So they do that during class.
I have them do this in real time. So I have to designate, it requires a little bit of time management on my end. I have to designate, okay, I'm going to be giving them 15 or 20 minutes. Whatever I want to do, I usually add a minimum of 5 minutes for them to work on that activity. And that has worked pretty well. Sometimes if I really want to follow up, if I'm really pressing them, like in my later courses where they're getting ready to go to the clinic, I might designate more time for the discussion and the follow-up so I can press them a little bit more. Looks like, let me pull up the PowerPoint, and then it looks like we might have a comment too on the chat here in Zoom. Oh, so Katie's asking, have you created an assignment description and example using Padlet? I usually describe what I'm looking for in my initial PowerPoint. So if I have a discussion description, I usually do that separate. I just create my Padlet handouts as the summaries of what it is we discussed. I suppose you could use this to be the instructions, because you could have AI generated images and things like that, but I haven't done that. That's a great question though. Let me share my screen back on the, let's come back to the PowerPoint. Give me just a moment to adjust the screen here. All right, and we're going to pull that up in slideshow form. So just a few comments. I think I've emphasized these, but to reiterate them for you, you have to be engaged as the instructor. So it's active for the students, but it's active for you. I have found that if I moderate a Padlet discussion, it goes significantly better than if I just let them post, because they're going to write and then they're going to turn their attention away. But where I've established the expectation that they're going to write and we're going to talk about it, they maintain their focus a little bit longer. I also find that when I am following up on the posts, that the more validating I can be, the better response I get. So if I have a post that maybe is off the mark, I'm approaching that from a, can you explain this to me? I want to hear your thinking frame. And if it's something that I like, I say, wow, this is wonderful. But I try very hard to avoid no, that's not what we were going for, because that kills the rapport that I'm trying to build in that moment with my students. And as funny as it sounds, I have to go through that process every time we're together. And it takes the whole time they're in our program, 3 years, for them to not need Padlet as much. But it takes multiple semesters of this kind of interaction before they're more comfortable with me. The other thing I would say is keep trying new things. I was exploring on Padlet TA and I saw a memory tiles game, and I was just trying something like that, and I can see all kinds of ways I could use that to follow up as a follow-up activity for something that we're learning. You could make this as involved and graded as you need, or as, let AI generate it for you and provide it as just an optional activity for them as a follow-up. But a lot of what Padlet offers is focused on engagement and interaction, whether it's with each other or with the AI tools that it has built in. And so it's promoting an active learning environment. Any questions before we brainstorm? I'll take questions at the end, but any other questions that people have on what Padlet is, how to set it up, how it can be used?
One question I have is, you say that there are 3 boards that you can use at a time. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So then you download after class the discussions. Does that mean you typically use just 1 board per class? I mean, how many columns are you limited to? And then I've got the other question, I guess, is like, because you're limited to 3 boards, do you keep those questions? I guess you have those in the handouts for future semesters, right?
And the pin doesn't capture audience.
Okay.
Very well, so you might want to read.
Yeah, so the question is, if you only have 3 boards, is there a limit to the number of columns you can have in a Padlet? So within a single Padlet, I have not yet found a limit to the number of columns. You can just keep scrolling to the side. And then since I have to recycle these, if I wanted to use the same questions, I have all of my questions built into a PowerPoint as well. So my PowerPoint has my questions. When I'm ready to build my Padlet again, I can just post those questions back into a Padlet the next year. If you don't want to do that, you could upgrade to a more expensive version of Padlet. But I have a high value on free. And so I'm willing to take that little extra step of recycling. But if you didn't want to, you could upgrade to an unlimited number of Padlets. And then you'd have unlimited everything. What was the second part of your question?
I think that answers
Okay.
the follow-up, because you want to have stuff for next semester, right? And if it worked well this time, then it's why reinvent the wheel, right? So
Yes, yes, yeah. Don't reinvent the wheel if you have something that worked really well. That's why I would advocate for exporting the Padlets so that you, at the very minimum, have a record of what happened, and then you can comment or save that however is good for you. But I have all of my questions embedded into a PowerPoint. Padlet is simply the medium where the discussion happens. And so I'll usually have my full question on the PowerPoint and a paraphrase of the question in Padlet so students know where to post. That's a great question. Any other questions? I think with we've got a little bit of time. I'm surprised I'm as on time as we are. So that's pretty good for me. I'd like to brainstorm together, right? There's situations we all face, and these may not be exactly what you face or the challenges you face in your classrooms, but hopefully this can at least get some of the creative juices flowing and help you come up with some ideas of if you think this would work for you, how? So the two scenarios are, one is an in-person class where students just aren't participating in the discussions. And the second is an online class where students are trying to participate, but they're interrupting each other and it's really inefficient. So let's look at these scenarios together. So I'll give you a little bit more detail. Let's assume for our in-person class, you're teaching about 45 undergraduate students. You're following up on a research analysis assignment. Last time you tried to follow up on your assignment, nobody really said anything about how it went and what they thought. You want to avoid that awkward silence this time. So that's our scenario. You're trying to follow up on a research analysis assignment, and you really want students to actually share something. So my question is, how could you use Padlet to improve your class engagement as you're following up on this assignment? If you didn't keep the original Padlet open on your device, feel free to scan the QR code again. Try to write your answer in 2 minutes or less. We've got a little bit of time though. And when you get back to Padlet, click on the little plus for your post under class scenario 1 so we can see all of your responses together. I'll give you some time to think about it and write your responses. All right. There may be some more responses coming in, but let's look at what you wrote. I really like what some people are saying here. And I'm trying to show you examples of what Padlet can look like also. So Katie posted first, and I liked her response because she described, with a little bit of detail, I could visualize her Padlet. She's going to have columns, and she's going to have her headings of what went well. That's maybe one heading. Another one would be what was hard. A third one would be what do you need more information about? Right? So like I can see how Katie would set up that Padlet. I appreciate someone gave it an upvote. That's really nice. I have that turned on here. Just know if you're going to do upvotes, you also allow for downvotes. But that has been a way where I did an activity with students where I gave them 2 votes. Everyone posted. I said, okay, now go through on this topic and give your 2 favorites an upvote. And you can give your least favorite a downvote. And we averaged what was the class consensus. And then I told them why I didn't disagree with them as the instructor, right? But we were able to talk about, well, this is what the students were liking, and this is what I thought. That gave me some really good insight. But I was also able to comment, right? So I offered some commentary like, hey, Katie, I really like that. We can do that in real time. So I like this idea. We've got a mind mapping exercise. That's really great. And if you can find a way to do that in Padlet, that would be awesome. Maybe they just, maybe they do a word vomit to help them get ready for that mind mapping. Or maybe you just have them do their favorite terms, or like, give me the top 5 words that you would use to describe this experience. And you could use those, pull all of those out, and then put those and make your own word cloud. I mean, they got all kinds of things you could do from that. I like this idea of ask them to describe the advice they'd give to a future student on the assignment. Wow, wouldn't that be awesome if you had your students write that out for you and then you turned it into a handout that you could just give to the next class? This is what students said would be helpful. And you didn't have to do any of it, right? They wrote it all for you. As we come up here, using the open-ended questions. So again, it sounds like this could be in a column format, like what Katie described for Unusual Snail. We're saying a Padlet discussion for feedback, right? Maybe you could have a column that says, how could I make this better for you? That might be a difficult question to ask, but this could be a forum where you could get informal feedback in real time from your students on how things went. And if that was the case, maybe you make it anonymous, right? Maybe you say, I'm going to make this anonymous, but I just need to know, how did it go? Or if it's a multi-part assignment and you're trying to be able to make adjustments, you could get that anonymous feedback and then adjust in real time for the next part of the assignment. Excellent. Rather than taking the time to go back to the PowerPoint, it's just going to bring you back to the Padlet for class scenario 2. So I'll just describe this to you. This is a class where students are engaging, but it's in an online format and it's a little sloppy. Students are talking over each other. They're forgetting to turn off their microphones. And you are trying to get their insight on an assignment that you're trying to have them do. You're trying to get how they feel about it. How could you use Padlet in that situation? Or would it be the same? And if it's the same, tell me why you think it's the same. Or if you feel like it's very different, describe that a little bit in class scenario 2. So if you'll just come over here, click on your pluses here, tell me your thoughts there. And I'm going to give you 1 minute for this one, because we're getting close to the end of our time. Great. So I'm seeing some of my first posts, maybe do the same thing. I think that's great. We don't have to, I think I heard it said, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? If you feel like the format would work to follow up, maybe it works as you're trying to give instructions to get the real-time feedback. Yeah, okay, maybe general comments. Yeah, I like this idea. I appreciate what Unusual Snail is saying. Rather than having people try and comment in the chat and comment on top of each other or open on their microphones, maybe just, here's the common areas you might have concerns about. Write your questions here in Padlet. If you have anything I haven't addressed, put it here. But that way it's all coming in a way that can be organized rather than just in one long, arduous Zoom chat or in one messy conversation. Great. And if you're typing additional comments, I really appreciate you taking the time to think and do that. I'm going to transition back to the PowerPoint just so that we can wrap up and before this hour is over. So I just want to summarize by reiterating that active learning is critical to maximizing our student outcomes. I have found Padlet to be a relatively simple but it provides me with a wide variety of options to encourage active learning with my students. It's free, I can customize it, and I'm continuing to explore how I can use it with my students. And I think that as you, if you feel like this will work for you, can provide opportunities to engage with your students and provide them opportunities to be active in your classroom. Are there any last questions before we're out of time?
I'm curious if there have been any approaches that you tried that just bombed that you would not go back to using Padlet. I actually do not like anonymous most of the time because that was the one instance when I didn't even have a pseudonym. I had them just post anonymously. And I asked, well, who posted this? And there was no semblance of ownership. So that's been probably my biggest Padlet fail. The other times when it hasn't been successful is when I haven't given myself enough time to follow up on the comments. I've had them post, they generated ideas, but I didn't follow up well enough. And I feel like it lacked the meaning that the activity could have had. So my intention was good, but because I didn't follow up, because I didn't highlight things, and I just learned about some of the sharing features after that experience, I wasn't even able to give them the handout and say, hey, think about these things. It just kind of, we did it, but I don't know that it was maybe somewhere in between passive and active, somewhere in between. It looks like we had another comment in the chat, a question in the past. Oh, just a thank you. Okay. I want to thank the ICDPT program for their support in me and the Center for Learning and Instructional Excellence and the Bengal Success Center for the opportunity. I'm very grateful for this. Grateful for the people who provided feedback on developing this presentation, specifically my wife. I got a lot of feedback from her. And thank you to everyone who participated today. This wouldn't have worked without your comments. So thank you very much. If you have questions, if you want to screenshot this, here's my contact information. I am in the Pocatello campus. And these are the resources from which I drew. So thank you. Thank you, Devin.
Thank you.
You have a question, Michael?
Yeah, I actually did. Devin, I was going to ask you, so in the Padlet, if a student is not there in class, say they have missed class or something, I guess they can find a summary of the Padlet somewhere?
If you export it as a PDF, then you could post that on Canvas and they could see a summary of that.
Great, thank you.
If they aren't able to attend in class, but they can attend via Zoom, they can, as long as they can get to the QR code, they could access the Padlet even if they were via distance. Like today, we had 2 other people in this classroom and everyone else on Zoom, but because everyone could see the QR code, we could contribute in real time with each other.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One thing I like about the Pull Everywhere tool allowing me to ask one question at a time. Then you have to go back and then activate another question. But here you can set up as many questions as you want, I guess.
Yeah.
So do you have an average of like 5 questions a class, or is it just vary?
I would say I'm fairly variable in the number of questions. It depends on what my purpose is. If I'm trying to reinforce a concept, I might ask a few questions about it. But when I'm trying to have my students create, I tend to actually ask fewer questions, but we discuss them longer. Because I might customize my fields more. I might say, here's my question, but tell me this and this and this about it. And so I can't ask as many of those because it takes more time to follow up. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.